From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Speaking with the Enemy.
Yes, it is Speaking with the Enemy as we continue our look around the rest of the CFL ahead of free agency. And today, very pleased to be joined by Mitch Gallo from TSN 690 in Montreal. And Mitch, Danny Maciocia has certainly been busy. He wasted no time after the Grey Cup, re-signing Vernon Adams Jr. I think it was less than a week after. So Maciocia's been busy right up until this week.
Yeah, he really has been. And I think by his standards, last season was a bit of a disappointment, losing in the East semifinal to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And I think he looked at the team and saw what was some very clear holes and weaknesses and has already tried to address them. I don't know if he already has. And I think, when you looked at the season in its entirety, it was rather predictable what would end up doing the Alouettes in. They were not able to capitalize in the red zone. They turned over the ball way too often, and that includes when Vernon Adams Jr. was in the lineup, by the way. I know it was a few fumbles by Trevor Harris in the playoff game, but interceptions galore at times from Vernon Adams Jr. And maybe the biggest thing that the Alouettes were looking at this offseason was special teams. They brought in Jeff Reinbold, who I know you guys are familiar with, Mickey Donovan, who was coaching at the university level, no longer with the team. And then discipline was such a big issue too. And I don't know how exactly you address that. Maybe making a couple changes to the coaching staff will help. I think Kahari Jones will be on the hot seat this year, maybe more so than any other coach in the CFL. There was rumblings when last season concluded that maybe Danny Maciocia would make a change at the head coaching position because of all the penalties that they took. And those things came back and bit them in the behind in the playoffs. So, it's been a long off season for the Alouettes, longer than I think Danny Maciocia would have liked. And I think he's trying to already address some of the things that did them in.
We saw a trade where, offensive lineman Tony Washington going to Edmonton in exchange for Mike Moore. Does that immediately kind of fill a need for this Alouettes team? And are you surprised by the move? Again, Maciocia staying busy, but a trade in January, not something you typically see in the CFL.
Yeah, I think this was more trying to get some value for Tony Washington before it was too late. I think we saw some real up and downs in his game last year, and also some even questioned how committed he was. And, he's a player who's getting a little bit older and playing a very important position on that offensive line. I think if you look at that playoff game against Hamilton, once again, I mentioned the fumbles by Trevor Harris. Well, that was in large part because of some poor play on the offensive line. I think, we also saw the team release David Foucault earlier in the offseason. He had a miserable game in that playoff game, and really protecting the quarterback's left side was an issue for the Alouettes. So I think with Washington, more so making that trade now to get value for a player that I think the Alouettes believe is on the decline.
You mentioned Kahari Jones being on the hot seat. Is that a coincidence that Anthony Calvillo is now a part of this coaching staff? Am I reading too much into that, Mitch, or what?
Read into it as you may. Of course, a few years ago, they did bring Anthony in as a receivers coach, funny enough, and he was back coaching at the university level. I think everybody knows how respected, how loved Anthony Calvillo is in this city. I think looking at him as a possible replacement to Kahari Jones in 2022 might be a little bit premature. I think he needs still to gain experience coaching. I think, the progression is maybe quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator, and then maybe we could finally start talking about him taking over the coaching duties. But I just think that Danny Maciocia at this time is not fully sold on Kahari Jones because of a lot of the things we saw continue to creep up. I think the problem here is, and I don't want to get too long-winded, but if you've heard from Kahari Jones, he's seriously one of the nicest guys you'll hear from, meet, speak to. He is a gem, just a quality human being. But I think sometimes when you're coaching a football team and your nature is to be a really nice, friendly guy, when it comes time to crack the whip, it's a bit of a challenge. And I think at times last year when the Alouettes were having really bad discipline issues, Kahari Jones wasn't necessarily able to crack the whip or come down hard or get the attention of his team, who respect him. Don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes you need to play bad cop, and he struggles to do so. Now we'll see how he's able to balance the good cop, bad cop act in 2022.
And there is always that idea that, I mean, Kahari Jones was here first. He wasn't Maciocia's choice. The GM kind of gets final say, kind of what we were talking about when I was chatting about the Red Blacks with Sean Burke and Paul LaPolice, who was there as well. Let's go back to the player side. Free agency, of course, opening up on February 8th. We're in the legal tampering period, as the CFL calls it. Where on the football field are there specific names out there in free agency that you think if the Alouettes were to make a splash, they might go after, or a hole that they need to fill?
I don't know about specific names, but I know what Danny Maciocia's mandate is, and I know what Danny Maciocia believes, and that is that football games, more specifically championships, are won at the line of scrimmage. And I mentioned the struggles of the offensive line in 2021. I think that would be an area that he's going to key on and try to address, whether it's through free agency or through the draft or with their scouting staff. So I believe offensive line would be an area. I think the defense as a whole played very well, especially when they made a change at the defensive coordinator position last year. I think that, again, I would look at getting somebody elite pass rush on that D line would be an area that they would look at. But it's the trenches. It's the offensive and defensive line that I think would be Danny Maciocia's most pressing need. I think if you look at the offense, set at running back with Stanback, set at the receiver position with Jake Weineke, who won the Offensive Rookie of the Year just 2 years ago. Eugene Lewis, you guys know he played that playoff game injured, but we expect him back at full health. Quan Bray had a bit of the drop issues in 2021, but I think is a speed threat because that is an area where the offense doesn't exactly have a ton of speed, but I think Bray could fit that mold. I just really believe offensive and defensive lines will be the key issue and biggest concern for Danny Maciocia this offseason.
And we know the Ticats have been busy taking care of their trenches, both offensive line and defensively, with the big signing of Dylan Wynn today. I want to go back to Vernon Adams because, I mean, we have tape on him now. And now that last year didn't go the way he wanted to, obviously with the injury, but should he be feeling the pressure a little bit to start to be that guy? I know going into last season, the question was, is he ready to make that next step into the elite quarterbacks of the CFL? And again, maybe he took a little bit of a step backwards. Where is the city of Montreal? Where are Al's fans at when it comes to Vernon Adams Jr.?
You're 100% right when looking at him and having question marks. Obviously, the 2019 season was so good for him and really took the league by storm, and showing that he's more of a new school quarterback, somebody who's able to both get the job done through the air and on his feet, which is really hard to defend when he's on his game. But in 2021, I think we saw erratic play. We saw turnovers, and not just turnovers. You could turn over the football and get away with it, but it's turnovers at the worst time and turnovers that lead to points on the board for the other team. I mean, I go back to a game early in the season in Calgary, and the Alouettes look like they're about to string together a winning streak. They're up 14-3 in the second quarter. Vernon Adams throws an interception. Calgary gets all the momentum. They score a touchdown 2 plays later. It's 14-10, and Calgary's off to the races with all the momentum at halftime. It's instances like that he has to clean up in his game. And I think for people here in Montreal, they're just so used to stable play at the quarterback position. It was Anthony Calvillo year in and year out, and you knew what you were getting. Calvillo retired, and I forget the number now. I think we're at quarterback 14 or 15 since he retired, which is just a crazy number. But the best we've seen since then is from Vernon Adams Jr. But you're right to question his play, because right now it's one good season, one not so good season filled with bad play and an injury. So can he come back in 2022 and regain the form from 2019? We have to wait and see, but it's no slam dunk by any means.
There aren't a lot of names out there when it comes to quarterbacks. I mean, Jeremiah Masoli is going to kind of demand starter money out there on the market. I would think it's highly unlikely that Trevor Harris comes back to Montreal. But what do you think they do there in that depth position? Knowing, again, I mean, Vernon Adams has his moments, but I mean, they really found themselves in trouble in 2021, when they didn't have a quarterback, when Vernon Adams Jr. went down. Do you think Maciocia addresses that in free agency here?
I don't think so. I think it's keep your fingers crossed and hope for the best. No. You're right. I'd be very surprised if Trevor Harris is going to be brought back because of the money that he would command. And you know what? Danny Maciocia and Trevor Harris have experience together from back in the Edmonton days. So it was, a good move and expected when they brought him in, when they ran into injury problems. But I think of a healthy Vernon Adams Jr. and then at the backup position with Matthew Schultz, before Trevor Harris came in, he needed to learn the system and have practices with the team and everything like that. Matthew Schultz had a few really decent starts, including a couple wins as a starter. And I think they liked his progression. And they like his story, his work ethic, the time he puts into being the number 2. And I think they feel comfortable with him if they would have to go with him for a short amount of time. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's a guy who's able to play 10-plus games on a championship caliber team. But if Vernon Adams, because of the way he plays, his style, gets banged up, has to miss a few games here and there, I think they're good with Matthew Schultz.
Well, it's funny because when you talk to people in CFL circles, they always say, well, you need 2 quarterbacks. And I think Zach Caleros kind of proved everybody wrong in 2021. He said, it's okay, guys, I can do this myself. And with the Ticats, obviously deciding on Dane Evans that, maybe it is a 1 quarterback league going forward here in the CFL. Mitch, it's great to connect with you. Thank you so much for doing this. Looking forward to an exciting 2022 Als season.
Dude, you have no idea how excited I am for football, even though it's still so far away. So thanks for having me, and I'll join anytime. Appreciate it.
I'll take you up on that. That's Mitch Gallo from TSN 690 in Montreal.